Everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today we are going to be adding fractions, and this seems a little tricky because it has several steps, but I'm going to walk you through step by step. So before we start doing the actual equation, I will write down our topic. It is adding fractions, and I'm going to go over a couple of terms with you that I'll be using. So just as a refresher, the numerator is the number on the top, and the denominator is the number on the bottom of the fraction. Whenever you're adding fractions, you're looking for the lowest common denominator. And I'm going to explain that as we go through the problem. But the steps are going to be that we're going to look for the lowest common denominator. Then we'll rename the fractions and add the numerators only. We will not add the denominators. And then after we do that, we want to make sure that we have it in the simplest form. So let's get started. So the first equation, let's do 1/5 plus 3/7. So get you a pencil and a sheet of paper. You may have an iPad, whatever you have. Let's get that and let's get started. So what we want to look at is the denominators. So what's the lowest number that 5 and 7 have in common if you were thinking in terms of multipliers? So what numbers? Well, the lowest common denominator with 5 and 7 is going to be 35. So what I'm going to do is write that down here, the common denominator for those two numbers, because we want to remember 35. Now that's the first step. Once we identify that common denominator, we are going to be done with the numbers on the bottom. So I will rewrite our fractions. And in order for me to rewrite the fractions so that they are equivalent, I'm going to look at what do I multiply by 5 to get 35? Well, we know that 7 times 5 is 35. So that means that I will have to multiply the one on the top by 7. And once I do that, I will end up with 7 over 35. Because remember, 35 is going to be our lowest common denominator. So I'm going to come over here and write, now let me erase that. I'm sorry. I'm going to come over here and write 7 over 35. Now we're going to add that to the equivalent of 3/7. Well, in order for 7 to be equal to 35, we had to multiply that 7 by 5. So we'll have to multiply the 3, the numerator, by 5. So now when I rewrite this, it'll be 15 over 35. So the next step is to simply add the numerators. So 7 plus 15 is 22, and it will be over 35. We can't further simplify, so this is our answer. It is 22 over 35. So now we're going to move on to another problem. I'm going to make this one a little easier. So I'm going to try to find two fractions that aren't quite as difficult. So let's write down 1/6 plus 5/12. I think that's a good one. And that way it's going to be pretty easy for you to look at your denominator and find the number that the two of them have in common. So write that down, 1/6 plus 5/12. And then let's take just a few seconds, and I want you to think about what that common denominator would be between those fractions. Okay, if you're hanging with me here, I think most of you will be able to figure it out. I was trying to slow down a little bit. So the common denominator with 1/6 plus 5/12 is the number 12. If we're just looking at the bottom numbers, we know that 2 times 6 is 12 and 1 times 12 is 12. So 12 is the number that those two denominators have in common. So I'm going to come down and write common denominator. So let's do a recap here. Now that we know that we've got the common denominators and it's 12, think about our next step. So I'm going to just talk you through the next steps and then we'll write everything out so that it makes sense. So we know that in order to get our common denominator, which is 12, I had to multiply 2 times 6. So if 2 times 6 is 12, I'm going to also have to multiply my numerator by 2. So I would then have to multiply that 1 times 2, and that's the same fraction as 1 over 6. It's just not simplified. So I'm going to come over and write that renamed fraction. But the thing to remember about the second fraction, which is different from our first problem, our first equation, is that 12 is already the common denominator. So because I didn't have to do anything to the 12, I won't have to do anything to the 5. I won't have to do any multiplying. So now we're ready to rewrite our fraction. So remember, 1/6 is now the equivalent of 2 over 12. And I'm just slowing it down for you to make sure that it makes sense to everyone, to give you time to kind of process it. And then for the 5/12, again, we did not have to do anything because 12 was a common denominator. So we'll rewrite that as just 5 over 12. So just take a minute to process that. Hopefully you're still with me here. So now all we have to do is add our numerators. So if you look at this, it's pretty easy, simple math. 2 plus 5 is 7. And we've already found our common denominator. So our answer, I'm sure you've guessed it by now, will be 7 over 12. So that is how you add fractions whenever they have the uncommon denominators. You will have to find your common denominator, rename your fractions, and then add your numerators. Okay, guys, thank you all so much for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you have not done so already. Take care, and I will talk to you in the next video. Bye for now, and stay smart.